You explore every possible sound in this movie, and things that we normally think, like dropping a fork. That what's the big deal about that? But how did you go about uncovering all these? I would say innocent sounds that all of a sudden in the movie become absolutely horrifying.
It's a great question. I think I always knew in that first pitch, I told them that sound would be the main character of the movie. Not a main character, the main character. But how we came about that, one of the beautiful things about being an actor that gets the great opportunity to direct is you get to use all your experiences as an actor on these different sets. And one of the things I learned that I've always focused on is no matter how much you plan on something, leave the door open for an organic moment to happen, because there's something magical about, you can plan the hell out of a scene, but we didn't have that lamp kicking over and starting a fire till the day we were shooting it. There was just something about the room and how it was going and the kids playing that we realized that the lantern should hit. You leave the slightest bit of door open and magical things can happen. So the idea of sound, one of the things I remember most about it was day one of shooting, we had the family crossing the bridge at the beginning. And when we cut, I heard the crew members saying, "Man, the forest sounds so beautiful." And you realize we don't take time to think of all these things and really take in sound. And so we started focusing on every little detail that we were going around. And every movie will do, room tone, but we weren't doing that. We were doing an entire world and universe tone, which was really, really special. But my favorite story about sound was, again, leaving it organic. Had not thought of giving Millie her own, we called it the envelope. So every time you cut into her perspective, there was this lacquer of sound, but it wasn't dead silence. And where that came from was one day I saw her talking to her mom and she walked away. And I said, because the mother was talking to her as she signed, which I always thought was interesting. And I said, "Can she hear anything?" And she said, "She can. It's a low-level rumble, but she can't hear me talking. But if you had a big crash behind her, she could probably hear a little something and also feel it." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I went into the sound designers and I said, "Guys, we got to try to achieve exactly what the mother just told us. We have to try to do that. Let's try to give the world what Millie hears every single day." And so I told the mother before South by Southwest, I said, "This is what we did. If you have any notes, let me know." One of the best, most incredible experiences of my life, not just this movie, she came up to me sobbing, crying as hard as I've seen someone cry. And she said, "For my entire life, I've wanted to know what my daughter was experiencing. And for the first time, he gave it to me."
Andrew and...
Thank you. Yeah.
Andrew and Brad, so now you have John, and he's directing, he's writing and acting in the film, and then on top of that, he brings his wife into the picture. How did you guys feel about that?
That's an interesting question, because when we first went to John wasn't on this call, but Drew and I were talking, and we said, "Well, what about his wife? Shouldn't his wife play that role?" And I think we both kind of drew straws to see who was going to bring that up to John. And we did. And I don't remember if it was Drew or myself, but one of us did say, "How about Emily?" And I remember John saying, "That just doesn't, I don't want to go there." It didn't feel right to him at that point. And
she was shooting an indie movie called Mary Poppins at the time. And I thought, got to support indie movies. Let her do that.
But he did say, he said, "But I promise you I will get you guys an A-level actress who will be great and it'll be fantastic." And so we just kind of said, okay. And there was the day then when John was presenting his vision of the movie to the president of Paramount. And John lives in New York, and he flew out, and we met him before the meeting, and we kind of sat down and kind of gamed out what we were going to say in this meeting. And we walked to the office, and as we're walking in, he says, "By the way, guys, Emily read the script and she wants to do it." He delivers that 1 second before we walk into the room and drops that.
That's called a mic drop, everybody.
And so that's how it happened. I mean, we just trusted that he would come up with something, and he did.
And John, you and Emily have kept a professional, different path. What was it like to choose to work together in this particular project? And
well, for me, it was simple. I didn't ask her to do the role. It was weird. When I was rewriting, it's the only person I thought of was her. There was nobody else in my mind, so I wrote for her. But I didn't think we would get her, and the reason why was, why didn't I ask her? I was very afraid that she'd say no, to be honest. I didn't want her to reject it, and that would make for very awkward dinner conversations. But I was more afraid that she would say, yes, I'll do it for you, because she is that type of person. She's that generous of spirit. She knew that this was a big moment in my career, and I was sort of trying something very big, a big swing. And I have sat next to her for 10 years. Every single time she chooses to do a project, whether it's on the couch or in bed, I see that moment where she says, I'm doing it. And I've never had anyone in my life have that much class, that much taste, and that much dedication to what she does. So I didn't want the first project to be, well, I didn't really love the script, but I did it for him. That's just the worst way to start any process. So I was actually going down the road with another actress that Emily recommended, and she was on the plane flying to these guys. I was flying to these guys, and she said, can I read the script? And I said, yeah, sure. And I went back to watching Ant-Man or whatever was on the plane, which was great. And she read the script, and she turned gray, and I thought she was going to be sick, so I genuinely was reaching for a barf bag and was handing it to her, and she said, you can't let anyone do this movie. And it was like in those romantic comedies where someone's proposing, and you're like, what did you just say? And she said, will you let me do the role? And because of that, by the way, I screamed yes so loud that I'm surprised we didn't emergency land in San Antonio or something. But it was because she came to it organically that this collaboration was perfect. I think that if it was that any other way, that's why I didn't ask her. I didn't think we would come around to that. But because she organically came to it, I trusted that she was going to bring everything that I've seen her bring to every other role for me, but more importantly for herself. So immediately it started, we have to treat this movie like our marriage. Everything above board's honest, let's just do it. Is there any line? Is there any scene? Is there anything in the script? And then I stood in the living room for 3 nights straight doing this a lot and going through every shot of the movie. And we did all the work at home the weeks leading up to the shoot. So by the time we got on set, we knew exactly what we were doing. All the collaboration happened off screen, and then directing her was just a dream.
The notion of the pregnancy, which is probably the most horrifying idea when in this premise with the silence and I mean, how did that come about? I mean, was that on the original script? Is that something that you added?
No, the idea that she was pregnant was in the original script. How we went about it was mine, and sort of how that sort of path from the basement up to the bathtub and all those different things. The idea that she was pregnant and was having to decide whether or not to have a baby was definitely in the original. And I think for me, that's one of those things like they're talking about where once it was Emily, my ideas for the scene completely changed again, and we started talking about how to do it, and I always saw the creature coming up from behind her, but it was always going to be about the relating to the idea of being pregnant. I knew that if you've ever had a child, I have not, but if you've ever given birth, you would see that and immediately have a visceral response. If you've ever been around a birth, you'll have a visceral response. If you've ever been a child, you'd have a visceral response, and so I think her performance took it to a whole nother level. I mean, she won't tell you because she's too humble, but that's one take. That bathtub full-blown experience is one take. And you can hear me on dailies say, so that's lunch? Like, I don't know what you do after someone does that. And here's how frustratingly good she is. After I said that's lunch, she's crying and terrified and scared, and there's a monster behind her, and she goes, by the way, what is for lunch? I heard it was chicken fajitas. And you're like, come on, what? I'd have to be in like a decompression chamber for a week after that scene.